Hello, good afternoon. Can you confirm we're on? I think so. All right, that should be okay right now. Hi, everyone. My name is Karolina Długosz, and I am Sustainability Lead for NetGuru, a company that is behind this live stream. We will be talking about carbon offsetting mostly today. But before I introduce my great guest speakers, let me give you some facts and figures about today's topic. So first thing is obvious, I hope, for everyone, and this is the fact that our human and business influence has warmed the climate to a rate unprecedented in the last 2,000 years, and this is according to the latest IPCC report. Companies started measuring their carbon footprint. You see it here and there. They will have to keep on doing it. They will have to keep on reducing their footprint, offset their footprint, due to already existing and coming regulations. We also know that forests are one of the best lines of defense against the climate change, but simply planting trees will not reduce and offset smashing carbon emissions that we have around the world. And also a little bit from our local ground, there was a research in the end of 2021 by Inspired Corporate Responsibility that 9 out of 10 IT companies with Polish capital do not yet measure their carbon footprint, but they plan to, and they plan to reduce their emissions. So that's one side. But on the other side, we know that many companies use offsetting to appear environmentally friendly. And we know that newly planted tree can take up to 20 years to cover or to capture the emission that the offsetting scheme is promising. We cannot cheaply buy the way out of this crisis. Offsetting is a helpful tool, but this isn't the first step, and this isn't the only step. And you might have read an article by Adam Wajrak, who is a Polish journalist writing a lot about the environment. He is saying this: the worst and most dangerous example of greenwashing is so-called forest planting. We see it confirmed in a book that you maybe heard about as well, which is written by Maciej Zaręba-Bielawski, The Forest Mafia Swedish eco-thriller, which is indeed a thriller about deforestation in Sweden. And now, knowing all that, at NetGuru, we want to do offsetting. We see little option for reduction. So we know the right order, and this is why we want to talk with our wonderful guest speakers, and they are, finally, Ewelina Sasin, co-founder at TerGo. Hi, Ewelina, great to have you. Dr. Hey, hello. Dr. Khaled Madkour, who is head and CO2 expert and sustainability specialist at TerGo, and also an associate professor of climate change at Ain Shams University. Hello, Khaled, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Oh, good. And Professor Boleslaw, professor of corporate sustainability management at Kozminski University, freshly back from a conference on sustainability in Warsaw today, right?
Yes, exactly. Hello.
Hello, everybody. It's great to have you, and it's great we can ask you all the questions that we have. And the first question is, before we even go to the discussion about offsetting, we need to understand that this is only a part of the solution. What should happen before offsetting? What are the first steps that we should take before offsetting? And I would ask this question to Professor Boleslaw.
I have to unmute.
Yes,
okay.
It works now. Yeah.
Yes, I think that it is an important task for a lot of companies, but of course it's not yet well regulated. That's the reason that companies mostly are doing this voluntary. And it's still a problem, but it's also a challenge because it's showing a way they are managing sustainability issues. So if the company has already some climate strategy based on real indicators, then of course what they are doing first is just that they would like to measure, at least to start measuring something like carbon footprint. And of course, when they are starting to do that, they can recognize that it's not so easy because at least we have three different scopes. And the first scope is about inside the company, in fact. The second is just infrastructure. I mean, electricity, heating, cooling, and all what we are buying for our company. But the third is the most important because it's the whole network of partners, suppliers, clients, employees going to our company and so on. So we have a lot of indicators and a lot of work, especially in the scope 3. And that's the reason that when we are starting to talk about that, first, companies are starting to think in terms of scope 1. Then they are just doing anything, to present something what people on the market are calling carbon washing. Carbon washing is not only greenwashing, but it's just saying, yes, we are carbon neutral because we are paperless in our bank. Yeah, if we are paperless, it means that we are carbon neutral. And it doesn't mean because for a financial institution, 97 according to different estimation, percent of the whole carbon footprint are in the third scope, scope number 3. So it's when companies are starting to measure emissions, then of course they have to manage, because it's a typical attitude. If you are measuring, because you would like to manage. And manage and reduce emissions and then, of course, verify their carbon inventory and then mitigate carbon footprint. And then, of course, market those achievements because it's a good way that company will present those achievements to general public. Why they are doing this? I think that the biggest requirement is from the market itself. So it means that if you are, looking for some contracts in the global market, it's quite obvious that a lot of your possible business partners will ask you about your carbon footprint. And what are you going to do with this carbon footprint in the next 2-3 years? So it's not enough that you will put, your goals for 2050. Yes, that we will reduce, 40% of our carbon emissions in 2050, because then nobody will take it seriously. But it was the case few years ago yet. So now it's just what we need. It's short-term goals and short-term strategy. Short-term, it means 2-3 years. So it means that we are expecting from companies the goals for CO2 emissions reduction for 2025. And then, of course, company became, conscious that it's not possible because the cost of reducing, of course, first 10%, 20% is normally it's just, limiting your waste management, in fact. But then, if you are going into, more, 60% of reduction, then the costs are going up pretty quickly. So the company are starting to offset remaining emissions. And then they are going into the carbon market, which is quite new, which is a lot of, carbon washing again. And I hope that we will explain better how to make your own choices, because it's really for a lot of companies, they would like to offset, they would like to think about, let's say, regeneration of ecosystem or restoration of different ecosystems, but they would like to calculate, they would like, to have the whole market. So on a macro level, we have in European Union, those carbon trading system, but it's on a micro level, on a company level, it's still a problem with that. So that's the reason that now we have a lot of different tools. And I hope that today we will present at least, some possibilities how to understand better what it's all about. But just to finish this, I'd like to say that it's according to different, reports, is always, if we are talking about sustainability trends, for 2022, 2023, it's always on the first place in a lot of different reports. We have addressing scope 3 through supply chain collaboration. So it means bringing suppliers along on decarbonization journey by encouraging or just, requesting from the adoption of renewable electricity, and can be a means to make progress on both supply chain resilience and decarbonization. So it's always, we are talking now about scope 3, and it's not enough just that you will be, paperless company and you are not using plastic bottles for your employees. It's much more than that.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So I would say we have few conclusions even from this introduction. First is we should start by measuring our carbon footprint, which is obvious, but now you draw our attention to scope 3 of this measuring. Then a number of times you repeated, it's about reduction first, and offsetting is the next step. So and also we learned another washing. So we have greenwashing, we have carbon washing, there's whitewashing. I'm wondering whether there's more washing. So we will come to that in the end, maybe. All right, we measure. We know what is our carbon footprint. We know where we can reduce, we reduce. And then we start thinking about carbon offsetting. And now the question to Ewelina. Ewelina, what is carbon offsetting and how does it impact a company? What is it? Can you explain it to us?
Offsetting is a way for businesses and individuals to take responsibility for all of their emissions now and invest in the transition to a low carbon economy. A company would purchase one carbon credit offset that is equal to 1 ton of greenhouse gas emissions, GHG, or more commonly used CO2 equivalent emissions. So an example would be if a company had at the end of the annual year 250 tons of CO2 equivalent emissions, and this is the most important, it could not avoid or reduce, then it would purchase this 250 carbon credits offset from an eco project that would sequester these 250 tons. So it is a way of balancing out the unavoidable CO2 emissions a company produces.
So you said there's another new term, or not new, we'll see carbon credits. So you say, I'm taking Madkour as an example, but it can apply to any company. So, okay, I did my homework. We measured it. I know what I can reduce or what I cannot reduce. I know there is offsetting, and I have secured my budget for this amount of the emissions I cannot reduce and I want to offset.
Exactly.
And now, before what I could do, okay, I have a budget, I pay a fee to any, you call it eco project, right? What should I know before I pay a fee to an offsetting scheme? What should any company know? Or what are the examples of these eco projects so that our audience can kind of feel it, or so that we can make it tangible for people? I don't know, maybe Professor Boleslaw, can you... you are on mute.
Yes,
Okay.
I started to look for some examples because I think it will bring more clarity.
Exactly.
And just recently, coming back from a B Corp summit in Rome for B Corp leaders, I came through Munich airport. And in this airport, I've noticed there is a special place when they are showing that it's the Munich airport is green. And it was for me, it was of course interesting. What does it mean? And I was, my first thought was, oh, it's again greenwashing, yes, saying. But then I've started
How
to
can
read.
an airport be green, right?
Yeah,
If
but
they are flying.
to read, and they have really long-term climate protection project. And you can find, on their website of munichairport.com, you can find, that Munich Airport creates a regional carbon offset project on almost 2,000 hectares of forest at location in eastern Bavaria between Regensburg and Passau. And they have 5 project locations of the climate forest there. And it's launching a unique and long-term climate protection project with measuring all offset. And they decided in their policy, they started from the policy, of course, climate policy, that they have, the goal is carbon neutrality by 2030. So it means 8 years. To achieve this, the airport decided they will use technology to reduce at least 60% of its CO2 emissions, and the remaining 40 will be offset through climate protection projects, preferably regional and relating to aviation. So it is also, I think it's an important topic that a lot of companies would like, to invest in this offsetting regionally, or nationally. So it just where they have their operations. And it's, and of course, this goal of carbon neutrality and balancing CO2 emissions, they have, as I said, those special climate forests that is resistant to the effects of climate change and can remove more CO2 from the atmosphere in the long term than conventional commercial forests. And they are presenting on different, pictures which were just everywhere in this airport. What are they doing really, to preserve regional wealth and of course associated jobs of people which are living in that area? What are they doing to promote regional biodiversity? And of course, talking about climate, it's important to understand that we are not talking only about 1.5 degree. We are also talking about this biggest trend, in fact, which is loss of biodiversity. And biodiversity is just, the nest for all human beings. Without biodiversity, we will not survive. And we can look at all numbers, how it's disappearing so quickly. So to promote regional biodiversity and using the wood from the climate forest as construction and furniture wood, CO2 is conserved in the wood, is bound for as long as possible, because they calculated that it will take for this forest at least 70 years to survive, 70 to 75 years. So they've calculated, with the help of one startup, they've calculated all this, also higher storage capacity for CO2 in the long run. And they have, a lot of, I don't want, to go into details, but they started this just last year, a few months ago. And it can show that, 5 years ago, Munich Airport was saying that, yes, and it was greenwashing. Now, mostly they are starting to calculate, and they have well-prepared plan, which is really transparent for next 10 years, what they will do to not only because they've measured emissions, but they have planned, what they will do with reducing 60% of emission. And it's, of course, technology, it will cost a lot, but also with those remaining 40%. And it's just, and of course, you can find on the web page a lot about CO2 offsetting in Germany. And and also we have a lot of projects like that in UK, in France. So it's going on. It started, I think, last year. So now if we are talking with some leading companies, they have already plans and they have already indicators, and they can inform rightly, just in a transparent way, really about all those, the natural value of this forest and how to calculate this, what does it mean, certificate for every ton of CO2 stored regionally in this climate forest, and so on and so on. So it's really interesting, and it's just starting, from being at the airport a few days ago in Munich.
But then if we see a very properly prepared organization like this airport to do the offsetting, is there any set of rules or criteria for a company to take into account when they are considering an offsetting project? We have one question from the audience, which is, it's a long one, so maybe we can divide it but I will read it now. How can we really ensure that the offset we purchase is effective in the long term? What happens if a biodiversity offset we purchased die out, species going extinct, forest burns down, change in land use is reverted back to monoculture? There's a lot of sub-questions to it, how to do it smart. So I would rephrase it a little bit to this. What are the criteria of choosing an offset project that will ensure that we really do it wise? Is there any golden rule for it?
So I'm not the real, specialist in those standards, but I know that already TerGo is working on such standards. So I think that we can expect more information from Khaled.
From Khaled, maybe. So I remember when we were preparing to this conversation, and I've learned from Ewelina and from TerGo that one of the key criteria is that without this carbon credit, this project would not exist. This is the first question. And why? Why this is the first criteria, that without the carbon credits that companies pay, then that this is the criteria? Can you explain a little bit more, Khaled?
Hello, everyone. First thing, a carbon credit or carbon offset should be issued to help finance the development of a project. That without this credits would never have happened. This is one of the most fundamental principles for all carbon credits projects. The most essential ingredient of carbon credit is additionality.
Additionality, you say?
Yes, additionality. And we need to make some clarification for this definition about additionality, because there are some confusion about what is meaning of additionality.
Yes.
Firstly, that all carbon credits projects must prove the additionality of the project. What does this mean? The project needs the carbon credit to exist. Additionality is essential for the quality of carbon offset credits. If their associated greenhouse gas reductions are not additional, then purchasing offset credits instead of reducing your own emission, it will make climate changes worse. For an activity or a project be additional, the possibility to sell carbon credits or carbon offset must play a decisive role in the decision to implement it. Make it or break it. No another option to project provider.
So what you say is when we decide of an offsetting, when we choose an offsetting project, we should make sure that this project would not exist without our financial support. This is how I understand it. So this is the first point.
Yes, and we be sure that without this carbon credits, the project will not exist. Unfortunately, the majority of projects don't need this carbon credits to exist. This is the reality. We see this issue with over 75% of the United Nations CDM projects, clean development, that carbon credits are assigned for projects already developed through regular finance means, like wind farms, solar panel farms, all other, many of carbon credit projects. So if a project would have been pursued without the sale of carbon credit, it is not additional, even if it reduced emission more than what they would have been in the business as usual scenario. Again, we can define additionality as that the project wouldn't happen without it continue, or will not continue to remove or reduce emission without carbon credits, not just reducing more emissions rather than the business as usual. No, but additionality means the existence for carbon credits to execute the project.
Sounds like an expensive thing to do. So when we secure a budget for offsetting, then the cost of one carbon credit differs. When you go to different web pages and look for offsetting schemes, then we have different prices of a carbon credit. Now, what should be included in the cost of carbon credit, or what is the price of carbon credits that are positively impacting not only the environment, but also society? Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, this is a very big issue to determining the price of carbon credit. As you said, there are many projects all over the world, and there are a large range for prices for carbon credits, starting from few cents of or divided of dollars, US dollars, to more than $50. But for make price or pricing the carbon credit, we must include that. These fees, or including the fees that will guarantee the land of forestry project like agroforestry or reforestry project, will be used solely to designated purpose for the specific amount of time, for 25 years, 50 years, the time period of the project, including the fees for filing the necessary regulations like ISO and other standard other regulations, including salaries for environmental and reporting specialists, including fees for keeping the land and seeding intact, marketing fees. And the marketing fees here, not related to marketing for make more enhancement, but like any business sector, otherwise no one would know about the project without marketing. And also including salaries for local farmers, training for local farmers in the sustainable farming as a new skill sets, rent or paying a price of the land. And at this point, I wanted to share to link to one figure about from the United Nations Global Forest Goals about that. About 252 millions of people living in forest and savanna areas and earn less than $1 per day. This is against the SDGs goals for non-profit. All these things, it's just a tip of the iceberg. But we already see that sometimes on something is warning if you found carbon credits selling for just $1. Something is wrong.
So you, in a way, you just gave us the definition of something that is called high quality carbon offset, like that you take into account local community, paying to farmers, paying for the land, marketing, anything that is related to making the project alive and the project from the scratch, let's say, from the beginning, a new project. Now, this is a lot, I think, to cover with the carbon credits. And now, why then, or what it is, we told about washing at the beginning. So how do you define greenwashing in offsetting? Ewelina, maybe you can answer that one.
Yes.
What is greenwashing and offsetting?
Yes, so greenwashing is a term that has been rightly or not overused and associated with various business efforts, including offsetting. Unfortunately, this term is used correctly in many cases. What we still have is companies buying low quality or junk carbon credits that are priced extremely cheap. And as Professor said before, in relation to the carbon credits, we can use the term greenwashing or carbon washing.
Yes.
Companies that buy these cheap credits either don't understand they are what harm they are doing to the offset industry, or they don't care. Naturally, everyone wants to save money, so companies want to offset their emission the cheapest way and claim carbon neutrality. So as a society, we must react when a company doesn't have any intention to reduce their own company emissions through reduction plans or changing their way to doing business. Plain offsetting with the cheapest carbon credits without reducing plan is just PR stunt. For companies practicing this type of greenwashing, it is cheaper and easier buy this cheap junk credits, and we call it an offset it and forget it attitude. At TerGo, we put great emphasis on explaining the harm $1 carbon credits are doing to the industry, to the society, to the environment. And this is no matter is this $1 carbon credit or $1.13. The main idea of carbon neutrality and net zero approach is that offsetting should be the last step to offset the remaining unavoidable annual emissions for a company after doing everything possible to reduce their emissions internally. Our decisive factor should be quality, not a price. Only a higher price ensures carbon credits positive environmental and social benefits. Additionally, it must be cheaper to reduce than to offset. Otherwise, companies will go on business as usual forever, and we never manage to mitigate climate change. So offsetting cannot be seen as easy solution. So that's the main points here. And I mentioned price here a lot because these cheap credits are usually from already developed projects, as Khaled said before, and they don't need them financially and are just an additional revenue stream to the project. They don't bring the additionality of CO2 sequestration.
You in a way, because we have some questions here, but you in a way answered part of them. We have a question from Radek. What are the key barriers for the adaptation of carbon offsetting? Which I understand what you're saying is the complex nature of this understanding what is the carbon credit, what we pay for, where should we pay for it. So this is, I believe, the barrier, and also the fact that companies want to offset without reducing. So this just buy it out and and have a low hanging fruit. We also have, let me see, because there's a lot of questions coming. I will come back to it.
I want to add one thing more because I'm telling about greenwashing and carbon washing, but they are still great offsetting projects out there. So we need just to do research before buying any offset. We need to find out who is the owner of the project, if the project is planting trees or they have additional social, not sorry, only environmental impact. If this project cares about biodiversity, about ecosystems. So this is the clue of choosing of offsetting projects.
And Professor also wanted to add something.
Yeah, I think that always is the question, why are we doing this? Yes, what for? Is it, for the environment, for the planet, that we would like to survive on the planet? Or we are just doing this, for our PR reasons? And then, of course, if it is only, short-term PR, then it was quite good, 2, 3, 4 years ago, when you were saying that, yes, we are carbon neutral, we are offsetting, we are doing a lot. Now, I think that the level of consciousness is raising pretty quickly. And and we have just a whole stream, of companies which are doing this as the best, as a best practice. And then we can compare. And then, because we have already, best practices, we have a lot of reports which are showing what is good, what is not good, why companies can decide to do it locally, like there was one question about that.
Yes.
And I think it's really, that a company or managers in the company are starting to think this fundamental question, why are we doing this? Is because it's not obligatory, yet we don't have regulations already which are required from company showing information on CO2 reduction. It's not obligatory. So it means that we have on this macro level this carbon trading system, but all those voluntary emission reduction are really voluntary. And then, of course, it depends on the level of education and the whole strategy. That's the reason we are just talking about, let's say, end of the pipe solution. So we have to go back to the strategy, to the goals which company could have, and are they going, to build their competitiveness in climate issues? We are talking now in the management about climate competitiveness, which is completely new. For years, we were talking about being price competitive. Now we are talking about climate competitive. And it's not a place among, really progressive companies. There is no place for carbon washing because there are a lot of also NGOs which are trying to monitor those strategies and the goals. And now, also there are institutions like science-based targets, which are accepting or not accepting your carbon reduction action plan. And then we have, I think, 5 or 6 companies from Poland already in this science-based target initiative, but in total there is something like 2,500 companies already. So it's really, we can go through those companies, we can learn more about best practices. And I think that for those companies which would like to do that because of, PR reasons, or just, because somebody decided that it will be good, to say that we are carbon neutral because our customers would like to have ecological or environmentally friendly companies, it's for nothing. But I think that the main also, just to add one thing, also the main motivation is coming, I think, from the market reasons. So it means if your business partners, if you are in the supply chain, and it's a lot of companies, of course, they have B2B model. It's not directly to individual clients. So it's in B2B model. It's like NetGuru. If you are, starting to work for a company which is your client, then they can ask you directly.
They already do. Yes.
Yes. And it's a kind of obligation then and motivation. And I think it will come to thousands of companies through those market measures, but of course, and market forces. Yeah, it will be just necessary in order to survive on the market. So I think that we have complementary motivations. From one side, it's just environmental motivation. There are a lot of environmental activists even in business. Yes, it's not only Greta Thunberg outside on the street, but it's also inside business. We can find a lot of environmental activists with great passion for changing, but it's complementary to those requirements from the market. And of course, regulation will help, but of course, it's still, a problem with what kind of regulation. We have a lot of new regulations now, but it's still, I think, maybe next time I will talk about that. But I think that this internal motivation, market motivation, is just the most important kind of motivation which we can find in the market.
Absolutely. We have seen this with the whole sustainability topic, actually, that the motivation to have sustainability strategy in place is either consumers or employees or other companies requiring their suppliers to be responsible or to be environmentally friendly, or friendly is not a proper word here, but to be responsible in terms of environment as well. So because this topic has become a mainstream, and we can see it like on so many conferences around the topic, so many eco projects that for offsetting that we can choose. There's a lot of companies that use it to greenwash, which is like a normal thing on the market, and there's a lot of parties on this market. And you told about these science-based targets initiatives and some other, but there are so-called third-party audits. So I assume they are the reason for them to exist is to, as long as these are companies' voluntary efforts, because the legislation is not pushing so many companies yet, then we need the third-party audits for something. And the reason is, for what do we need the third-party audit? Can't we just choose a not certified offsetting projects and just pay them a fee? Khaled, would you be willing to take this one?
Sure. The third-party rule is very important to confirm and verify the high quality for carbon offset, which will benefit the environment and the local communities by providing decent work conditions and funds for development. The role of third party, including verifying the project that follows a set of recognized approved standards. We have many standards all over the world. We are not different. We don't have any great difference between these standards.
Mm-hmm.
The second rule is the amount of CO2 emission will sequestered. The third party need to confirm and verify the accurate calculations, the correct calculation, verify the amount of carbon credits will be produced from this project.
Mm-hmm.
Confirm that the pricing for the carbon credit reflects the true cost of the project. We didn't have any gap for some additional prices.
Mm-hmm.
It's preferred to the third party to audit the project would be companies, entities, research centers, universities that are not dependent, especially in financial terms, on the company bringing them projects to audit. There is no business dependence on each other. The third party auditor should have the experts to audit all different types of standards and methodologies And as I said before, there are many standards all over the world for calculating carbon offset from all type of projects, forest projects, renewable energy projects, waste management projects. I think the third party should be expert in all different type of standards and methodologies, and not just audit selective view of type of standards.
So we also had a question, how many methods help us to calculate carbon footprint? Is there possibility to get one standard? I think the business world is looking for it to get one standard, but it's not there in place yet so much. But we are referring to different models of calculations. And I think this is where third-party audits come handy to help us match our emissions with the offsetting project that we have chosen and check whether this is accurate.
I just would like to add with this regulation here, because in fact, what is now in a European Commission proposition, in order to achieve climate neutrality or even negative emission after, I don't know, 2050, European Commission is now preparing a robust certification system to reward carbon removals. So they have three values: drastically reduce the use of fossil carbon, then increase carbon removals, and then recycle and reuse carbon. It is the whole question, what are we going to do with the wood which is cut off, after 70 years in the forest, for example. And of course, to scale up this carbon farming and different industrial solutions removing carbon, the Commission will propose later this year, as far as I know, it will be in September, EU regulatory framework for the certification of carbon removals. And it will set some kind of scientifically robust requirements for measurement, which will be transparent, which can be monitored, reporting system and verification of the all carbon removed from the atmosphere. And it's with all those, biodiversity protection, with different ecosystems in European Union and so on. So it's now just a brief, but I'm quite sure that companies which are now starting to learn that will be pioneers in this field and will be at the best position, because in fact, later this year, it will be more or less obligatory, and it's at least we will have certification system, and probably as a part of CSRD, which was just announced yesterday by European Commission and European Parliament, that they have already the whole framework for corporate sustainability reporting system directive, that it will be obligatory as a part of this reporting system. And EFRAG is now preparing indicators, and it will be in place. This obligatory requirement will be from 2024.
And now? Yeah, 2024 for 2023 to report the first year, right?
No. They prolonged this 1 year now. Yesterday they announced that the first reports will be 2025.
1 year.
The year 2023. But of course, in next 3 to 5 years, thousands of companies will be obliged to report. They will have reporting framework, and they will have certification system prepared by Commission. So I think that the market will be, really mature. Not yet, but it's, in 2-3 years.
Yeah, legislation which just may force businesses to do it, because voluntary commitments is never enough. We are coming close to an end, but I would like to ask one more question, because it's also in a way asked in our comments, which is, the question we have in the comments is, what if a company wants to offset locally? Does it make sense? So what we already know is that, or what at least was a topic of our conversations before, is that developed countries like Poland, for example, or Germany, should invest loans in countries that are most affected by the climate change. And this is what the climate justice says, right? So there is this term, climate justice. We have this concept, okay, we should offset somewhere else where the outcome of the climate change is more tangible. But even today, we heard some examples of local offsetting. So Ewelina, if you could elaborate a little bit about this climate justice concept and about where we should do what.
Okay. So maybe I will answer directly for a question first. So if company wants to offset locally and has reduction plans, has experts which help this company to do it in a smart way, it does make sense to make it locally. But developed countries need to invest in offsetting projects in less developed countries. And it has many benefits for both parties. The investing parties can offset their emissions while supporting regions that are the worst affected by climate change, mitigation and adaptation. And it's not a secret that the most developed regions contribute to climate change the most. On the other end of this balance beam stand the developing countries that get badly affected by global warming. Here in Poland, in Warsaw, Tri-City, or even in New York, it's just the weather that has changed and some prices have gone up. But for remote villages in Central America or Africa, the current situation is a matter of life and death. So climate justice aims to balance the world's inequalities by channeling the funding from rich to poor. And it's fantastic mechanism which comes to the aid of climate change if run accordingly to the highest standards. So I think that we need to hear this term climate justice at the next COP27 in Egypt. And I hope that all countries commit to executing it clearly, especially in light of the new global challenges like the current global supply chain problems for energy, for food, or products. So yes, it makes sense to offset it locally when you have clear plans and you are sure about that. But climate justice says that you should invest somewhere else to help the regions that we
experience the most.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. Thank you for bringing this term. I think it's important.
I would like just to add, we are in a way responsible, for the whole climate catastrophe. I mean, we in developed countries. So it means it is a kind of a moral obligation also, to offset in those developing countries most affected, but also we have to reduce our emissions in developed countries, in OECD countries. And according to recent IPCC report, or third part of sixth report, which was published in April, there is a clear statement that in each sector of the industry, there is a possibility of reducing emissions by at least 50% by 2030. So it means that the potential for reduction here in European Union or in US, UK, it's really huge. So we are not using this. We can do that a lot, and then we can, involve countries, developing countries with our offsetting programs. So it is a kind of a complementary strategy.
So it gives hope. If there's such a huge option for reduction in Europe, then legislation should be forced quickly, and we should act immediately. That's how I understand. Appreciate that so much. Thank you for bringing your insights, your knowledge, your perspective to this. I think it's important for everybody here to understand that this is our obligatory thing to do, reduce our emissions and offset, because we are, as Professor Boleslaw said in the end, we are responsible for that. And this climate justice term feels to me very important as well, because we are in a sort of bubble, probably. We don't always see what is happening elsewhere, and we should. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time. To all of you who were listening to us, and if there are any questions coming now, or you think about it and you have a question tomorrow, or anything that comes to your head, you can leave the question to us. We were this live stream was on LinkedIn, and I think YouTube as well. You can post your question somewhere there, and we will make sure we can answer it. Thank you, Khaled. Thank you, Ewelina. Thank you, Professor Boleslaw, Rok, and I hope we can meet soon with some good news to say, for example, that we managed to reduce significantly our emissions across our organizations.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.